Forgive us, we're all a bit feeling like giants up here, and too deadly to see so many people here. And what a conference it's been so far. So, Jingiwala, Gubbi Gubbi Jilgun Bugaba. So, acknowledging this beautiful country. That photo I actually took yesterday morning down on the beach there. This space has just created the most beautiful opportunity for deep yarns, connections, as has been done for thousands and thousands of years. So my biggest gratitude to the elders that have given and shown us so much love and welcomed us to their country so beautifully every day, and to the younger generations coming through as well. We're really just going to have a yarn today, share a bit about our organisation, how we do business, and the work that's been built over 20 years that these three deadly mob I'm with today have been a big part of. So I'll get through my part real quick. Thought before we go into the big yarn, just we'd actually introduce ourselves a little bit more. So I'm actually going to start. Doyen, do you want to kick it off?
Okay, name's Doyen Radcliffe. The presenter there got it all wrong. I'm a Nuggetja Wadjuri man of the Yamatji Nation. I'm also part of the Southern Yamatji Claim over in the Midwest region of WA. I'm the regional manager for WA for Community First Development, and been with Community First Development for 14 years, and I love the work we're doing in the way that we empower and build capacity of First Nations people that we work with across WA, but right across Australia, and it's a source of working with them.
Hi, my name's Tanya. I am a Luritja, Aranda and a Gurindji woman. I come from Central Australia. I currently live in Darwin and I work in communities up and around the top end. We work one-on-one with community members on the ground, and yeah, awesome job. So hopefully you guys will get to know a little bit about what we do today. Yeah.
Hi, my name's Eddie Miles. I'm a Walpuri Gurindji man from Central Australia. I have been with CFD for just over 10 years. Originally started in Darwin and I transferred to Brisbane. As I say, when I'm in Brisbane, I'm just passing through. And I'm happy to be here.
Thanks. And Ginnaby, so Gittabul Bunjalong woman. I've only been with Community First Development for 3 months and it feels like I've come home. It's so deadly to be back working in community, with community, and with values that connect culturally in a really strong way. I often share that one of the values of this organisation is country. And to me, that's really important because we are nothing without country. And so honouring and connecting and being with and learning from country every day is a really important part of the work that everybody does in this organisation. So it's an absolute privilege to be back in a space like this and with this deadly mob. So really quickly, to get on to the good stuff, this organisation, Community First Development, has been around for about 20 years. So we're a community development First Nations-led organisation, but also doing some research now, moving into that space as well. Have worked in over 800 communities across the country, so urban, regional, remote. Some communities, as you'll hear like today, we've had relationships for many, many years. Others, we're just starting to build relationships now, and so each connection we have is different and is based on what community wants, what community needs. We're just going to quickly go into a quick video, a couple of minutes long, with actually some of our community partners yarning up about what's important. The number one thing for us is self-determination. We've got nothing without that, and everything we do is based on our people determining what is best related to their communities, their needs.
Everything we do is based on people self-determination. It really is. It's about being able to be decision makers for your own life.
One of the reasons why I work with community first development is to get back what we're lost over time, to get our self-determination, our pride, our thoughts, and to be first people as we were 200 years ago.
I think it's like that they understand self-determination, that their specialist professionals have had a lot of training in culture and how to work with Aboriginal community members, that they don't actually dominate the conversation, that they let us tell them what we need and they come along for the ride. So they bring their expertise into it, but they very much let us determine how a project should go.
I think there's an expectation or an idea of what it is to be an Aboriginal person, and we're very self-determining and we want people to know our individual stories, and I think you just have to go in with an open mind and just to listen.
The organisation that we have, Community First Development, understands what's needed, and we don't impose anything, so they don't feel like they're doing things to people. And they understand the values of the organisation. It really is about nothing about us without us. You know, it really has to be driven from community.
So just a little bit about how we work. We only work by invitation, so communities invite us in. We don't impose. So only by invitation, 100% community driven. So everything we do, every decision that's made is made by community for community, and we just help facilitate that process. Another big thing is acknowledging the strengths that communities bring, their resilience, their stories. They've got the knowledge, and we're just opening that space. What we do is try and connect that practical support. So when communities are requiring assistance in certain projects, we can look at matching that particular expertise to go and work with community, once again, only with community's consent across the whole process. And everything and every project at its monitoring points is also designed and developed by community. So any story, any outcome, the community owns that. And so when we're thinking about the yarns that have been happening earlier this week around sovereignty, data sovereignty, that's a big part of what we're doing. And it's a journey we're still on, but it's about ownership of what happens, remaining with community, and community have control about that outcome. So going to head on now to the actual yarn and how we do business. So we're sort of going to facilitate it a bit like a yarn with me trying to be the person who asks the questions. So I'm going to throw to Doyen first. This framework is how we do business. It's our community development framework, and Doyen and Eddie were actually a big part of its development. So Doyen, you know, seeing this framework in practice, what does it mean for you? And let me know when you want me to move this thingy.
Yeah, I prefer to get up and walk around and talk, point. Community is at the centre of everything that we do with our community development framework. It's very important that self-determination, empowering the community to what they want to do, is fundamental to the way that we work and do things. The community owns and drives the process, and all we're there to do is to facilitate the process. Now, with our community development framework, you can actually download a copy off our website. So if you get on the community development, community first development website, you'll be able to download that. But the basics of like with any sort of, when you first start working with a new community or community, you've got to build our understanding of the community, understand what are the needs of the community, and start working and engaging and empowering the community to have that yarn and start building the trust and building a rapport to get a real understanding of the community needs. That's very important. From there we move to the next phase of connecting and building, connecting the resources, what is needed, the community wants, and try and bring in, if there's other stakeholders needed to come in, to bring them in. If it's after funding to help drive a community activity that's important to the community, then we'll work with the community, bring in the expertise to support the community. And it's also part of that process and working with the community is designing and delivering the activity with the community. And it's also about celebrating and reflecting on those wins every day. It's a battle for First Nations communities and organisations out there, and it's important. And the motion of the circular, it's like a double loop learning. This continues to flow because communities' needs are always out there. Communities want to improve the lives of their own people in communities. It's important that and one of the bases that, one of the ways that we work long term. We just don't breeze in and breeze out. We don't come in with our own agenda. And this is part of a community I've been working with up in Newman. So this is the Aboriginal Males Healing Centre. And part of the process was the planning process, empowering the community to decide upon building the Aboriginal Males Healing Centre to address domestic violence in the community. Instead of incarcerating the men, it's about healing so that the women and children feel safe from domestic and family violence. That's very important to understand that. And part of the process was being involved in the design of the healing centre. And this is only one small part of the big story. If we move along to the next slide, you know, it's community-led and it's designed. So part of that planning process was to do a mud map of what the community wanted. And this is bringing in the elders, bringing in community members to have a strong say in the future of how they want that healing centre to be designed. And it's also about getting out on country, touching the ground, Barna, looking around, designing this healing centre on country. And they also, and the important thing about it too, they incorporated the healing centre in the path of the Malu dreaming, which the men wanted as part of the healing process. So when they once they build the healing centre, there's a cultural aspect to addressing the needs of the men. If we move along to the next one, okay, once we sat down and did everything, we come up with a concept plan, and this is it here. And this went back to the community twice, 3 or 4 times, and changes were made. And once we got the final design nail, then we brought in the technical team, and these are engineers, different project managers who donated their own time to be part of this project. There's over $1 million of pro bono work carried out to do the costings to build the centre so that it can apply for the funding. We move across to the next one. And this is part of all the activities. Like I said, we work long term. We've been with them since 2016. It's a long road, but it's a big project and it's a major project, and it does take time. And these are the activities that I work with the community with, and we're still trying to access funding. When we first started off, we secured $250,000 for them, which helped develop everything else to get the concept plan and everything happening, and to secure the land. They got land to build it on. all we're chasing now is the big dollars to build the centre. They've already developed their clinical trials, and they do a walk-in service in Newman right now as part of that process. And it followed this process, this continuous, it's double loop learning, so it's like a spiral. You keep going and keep going and keep going. Follow that, the framework. Not all the arrows point one way. Sometimes different things happen all at the same time. So this is just simplifying the process. But the important thing is building a trust, and don't promise on anything you can't deliver on. That's the most important thing when working with community. Be truthful, be honest. And the great thing about it is every time you have a little win, the community celebrate, and then we celebrate, and everyone celebrates. But we're learning as we go, as we're working with communities as well.
Thanks, Doyen. Tanya, Eddie, do you have anything to add around this framework?
I will just add that one of the most important things in our organisation are our volunteers. We have a database of around 400 volunteers scattered all over Australia, and they range from gardeners to lawyers. So what happens is when we're approached by a community, they tell us what they want, and we try as hard as we can to find that person to match that project that they need to do. We can't do it without our volunteers, and they range from uni students up until 60 years old, and they have, like I said, there's quite a lot of experience in different areas. So,
thanks, Tanya. I'm going to move on to, I guess, this ecosystem, which is our theory that we work to, our change process, and self-determination is at the centre. That's at the core of everything. Part of this is that every element impacts another, so you can't remove one without an impact happening. So I'm going to throw to Eddie now. This story of change, what really resonates for you in the work that you do in relation to this?
A story of change is been working with an organisation or a community for a number of years and going through the steps, as Doyen showed earlier, that it starts off with one, but as that one proceeds, it grows and grows. So we call it a journey. So we go on a journey with an organisation or with the community on what they see as important to them. And the steps that is along the way in the journey, and as we grow in partnership. So with the ones I've been working on, one here in Queensland was Murray's on the Move. That started off by just a general contact and asking what we do and how the possibility of supporting them. And from one bookkeeping and accounting, it grew from there. So we went in through, starting off with them, getting a volunteer to support them in transferring all their financial stuff into MyOb. The volunteer supported them into learning and understanding MyOb and how to print their reports for financial end of year and so forth. And then from there, we had another request. They were seeking state funding. Being a small company that started off, and they were seeking funding to keep the growth going. So another volunteer came on board to support them around submission writing or funding writing, searching for grants, and they ended up winning a substantial grant from Queensland, which gave them more of a spread to support the youth and elders to get their driver's licence. They're also culturally appropriate, so all their instructors are Indigenous people, First Nations people. So when the youth or the senior member of the community is going through their licence, they're feeling comfortable that they are having one of their own as an instructor. So we've been working with them for probably the last 5 years on a number of projects, and they've been slowly developing and growing as well. And their biggest one was when they actually got the grant from the Queensland government. The next one there was in the Arnhem Lands, up in the top in there. And that was a community there that made contact with us. They were a bit worried about country. Country was being damaged or destroyed by the feral animals that they had wandering through their wetlands and that, which a lot of the elders and parts of the community was also fretting because they were starting to lose their wetlands, which was tied into their cultural practices. So they came in and said, how can we work this out? What can we do for you? So it became a environmental or economical sort of approach. So we sat down and worked out with the community and the elders on what steps would they want to take, because they had a lot of water buffaloes and wild pigs that was slowly destroying the wetlands. So we ended up coming from what their point of view was, is if they go out and it's fine to go and cull the water buffaloes and the pigs, but what do we do with the next step of that sort of stuff, what we do with the carcasses of the animals? So the process came up from one of the elders there that, well, if we're going to do these, cull these animals, we could probably make an economical advantage out of it. So then they came up with the idea of tanning the skin from the animals, turning the skin into viable leather, and then the community could probably produce leather products and sell through their art gallery in the community. So from that, they started to produce their own leather and they made a few products. So it was mobile phone carriers was a big hit for the community, leather belts, even an odd camping seat was produced, thongs was turned into that from the animals. So they saw that as protecting their wetlands, as also not just having the carcasses being left there, but also getting an economical advantage out of it as well.
Tanya Doyen, do you want to add anything around the story of change and how important that ecosystem is?
What'd you say?
Just adding to that story of that Eddie was just sharing about, you know, the story of change and how it interconnects, like with Murray's on the Move, you know, health and well-being, education, being able to, you know, enact cultural obligations around, you know, taking family members when you've got a licence to medical appointments and, you know, getting to education. So all of those interconnected elements that are part of the story of change in how we work based on the self-determination of communities.
Yeah, most definitely. Everything is interconnected. And even when Eddie was talking about the story of change, that organic process, nothing is ever hierarchical. That's why it's organic. It's like an ecosystem, because the community determines where they want to be. It's not about us determining what their story is or what their journey is going to be. So that's why when you see the story of change, nothing is hierarchical. It's not linear, it's circular and it's organic, and it flows in to fit in with the community's needs and aspirations at the time, and it changes as well depending on what the community wants and what their desires are.
Deadly, thanks. Before we just open it up to anyone who wants to sort of ask a question, I've got one for Tanya. You know, how does the framework, the community development framework and the story of change, you know, how does that connect with our organisational values and how we do business of that strong relationships and strong country for you?
For me, I think from experiences that I've had, it means everything to community people. You know, that's their home, and our measure of success is not what anybody else thinks about. It's their measure of success. It could be as simple as, you know, working out how to do, what do you call it? I can't think. You know, just horticulture skills, simple things. So if that's what makes them happy in their home, that's all that matters. Our service is free as well to communities. So, you know, that's another thing. There's no money involved with our organisation, and money is always an issue in communities because it's hard. A lot of people don't have that money. So, like I said, our volunteers are very important to us, and it does create, when you do a project in a community who own that project, they incorporate everybody. So it's not just one or two people, it's everyone in the community. And we like to have everybody involved in what we're doing, and we want everyone to know what we're doing there. You know, you just don't want some strangers walking around the streets and no one knows what's going on. So we like to tell everybody before we hit the ground what's happening. We come out, do a couple of visits with people prior to commencement, make sure everything, you know, make sure everybody's on the same page and everyone knows what they want. When it comes to country, this also is a big thing for us, because if people are feel safe in their own environment, they feel safe in their own country. You know, it in turn, it turns. You know, if you feel like something's going right on your land, it's a happy thing. People get a happy feeling from it, and it creates more than what we intend on doing sometimes. My little bit of a project here that I'm showing up in Yarralin community out of Katherine, we did a project with the remote school attendance scheme. They invited us to go out and do a film clip just to encourage kids to go to school. They started having a bit of a fall off, and once we got out there and started talking to people, it involved the elders as well, because they understand now that we're in the age where kids need to learn two ways. They had Wesley, this man up here, he's the RASAS officer, and his wife on the other side. That's Wesley and Desley. That's real, true story. But they are fantastic. They have saved the school so many times out there. You know, they go out, they go into people's homes to get these kids. They work with them after school, they work with them on weekends. They're just a godsend for the education department. Wesley, we've also done a few other projects with Wesley. He's a spokesperson for the community, so he approached us about doing public speaking. So we did a public speaking, and now he's the pin-up boy for, you know, that remote area. So, you know, and we're looking at doing some other projects with them as well, which incorporate the land and families and storylines and homelands and all sorts of stuff. So, yeah, really, really good. And I'm sorry, I should have had the film up here. It's, yeah, they've used it for their funding applications as well. So just to show, you know, what they're doing on the ground really does matter, and it matters to people in their community.
Thanks, Tanya. Dorian or Eddie, do you have anything you want to add around the importance of country with our relationships that we have with communities? I heard this really deadly quote actually yesterday. Brenda Croft was sharing a session, and it just resonated really strongly, and I shared it with Tanya this morning, and she was like, yeah, it actually connects with the work we are doing, and it's, and now it's gone out of my head. It was at the pace of trust, and I thought that's really deadly, because that's a lot of what we do. Is it's slow work, it's connected work, it's relational work, and so at that pace of trust, we're building and we're connecting, and if we're doing that, then country feels that as well, and it's vice versa. It's that two ways. So if country's strong, we're strong, and so that patience, that being, that slowing, that being at the pace of trust is also at the pace of country, and the seasons that we have and the time that we have. So just wanted to say thank you, and please, any questions, just sing out.
Questions, anyone? What beautiful artwork. Can you take us a little bit through that? That's gorgeous. Anyone? Oh, no?
I've got who the artist.
It was actually done by a young lady in, down New South Wales coast. We changed all of our artworks July of last year, I think, and this was one of them. So, and it represents both the water and the desert. So yeah, we love it.
And the interconnectedness of communities and that journeying that we make.
And the artwork and the name and everything, we were formerly known as Indigenous Community Volunteers, but we felt the name wasn't right because we're about community first development and working with the communities to do what the community wants to do. So all the rebranding, it's been a slow process over the last couple of years, but it's been a good changeover, and I think the name suits us. And we work with 130 communities at the moment, right across the board, collectively, or organisations, collectively, over time. So we do a lot of work, and we can get quite busy and tied down, but we work at the community space, and that's the most important thing, because we want to create that culture, safe place. Last thing you want is someone coming in the community rushing you around and pushing you around and to get something done. It's at the community's pace, and the community makes all the decision of where they want to head, and we just help and support them in their journey to get where they want to be.
We got a question down here.
Yeah, Rowena, Kimberley region, Western Australia. Thank you for saying who you were previously known as, because that was one of my questions. You had a presence in the Kimberleys, and think in the early days. Is that still around now, or because we'd be keen to find out a bit more about the body of work you guys do and how we can access that?
Yeah, what's happened, because of funding, we're a not-for-profit organisation, so we're reliant on government funding. We're very much reliant on government funding, and all our resources got pulled out, and unfortunately, a few years ago, we had to offer redundancy, and most of the redundancy was taken by staff in the top end. So from the Kimberleys right across to NT and Cape York, virtually all those community development officers went, which only left us with a small number of CDOs. Gradually over time, because we've got a fundraising team, predominantly, I forgot the percentage now, 70% of our funding is generated by ordinary Australians donating money or from sponsors, and the other about 30% is only raised by government, and we're still pursuing. Once we get more funding, we'll be able to grow and get back up into the Kimberleys. We are doing 1 or 2 projects up there, and we'll gradually move up that way. Same as up in Queensland, we'll slowly move up. We just employed a new senior community development officer in Cairns. So slowly moving up, but it's all depend on funding. Like anyone else, we all depend on funding and what resources we provide. I hope that answers.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry. Hi, I'm a Gugada woman living on Wurundjeri and Bunurong land, so thank you for today. I just had a question about what you do when there's a discrepancy between what a community might want and what you can deliver on. So if there's budget restraints or it's just not plausible with value alignment or some other condition, but what are some of the tips that you have for those situations and negotiating with the community at that level?
So at the very start of a relationship, there's really deep yarning about what a community's dream is and where they want to go. And then there's conversations that the CDOs and the regional managers have about is there a volunteer that can be matched to that? And then the community makes a decision about the volunteer themselves. So there might be, 3 or 4, or there might be just one. And the communities will actually engage with the volunteers, have yarns, and see if it's a good fit. And if it's not, the community makes that decision about going forward or not with that volunteer or with us. Most of the time, that is able to be negotiated. Occasionally, though, we will actually work with communities to refer them to an organisation or another agency that's better suited to work with them around their needs. So it's not it's a how can we actually work to best meet your needs if we can't do it as well. Does anyone else want to add to that?
Other questions from the other side of the floor? Yep.
Thanks very much for the presentation. Sounds like you're doing great work. I was just wondering if one of you could speak a bit more to, I saw up there it said that you do community-led evaluation and that you work with community to develop indicators that work for them in your programs. Just wondering if you could speak a bit more to an example of how you do that and your processes for working with community to give them, I guess, the ownership over the development of indicators and monitoring and evaluation.
All the data that we collect or information from community goes on our database is owned by the community. We actually don't own it all. So they own all the information on our database. We have an agreement in place that was partly developed by Terry Janke. She's one of the top lawyers in IP. So we're very careful, and even as senior community development officers, when we go into communities, we're always taking back things to communities all the time to reaffirm. Even though they sign the agreement, we also, as community development officers, have obligations to those communities to ensure that the sovereignty of that information that we have for the community, that we always sought in community's permission. And sometimes people think it's a bit of an overkill, but for us it's necessity because of the relationship we build and the trust that we build, and we want to make sure that the community fully understands everything that we do when we're seeking reaffirming everything every time we gather information. Even if we're taking a photo and want to put it up on the media site, we're always taking it back to the community. Even though we've got permission to use it, they signed a permission before, we always take it back.
Do you want to share a bit about your seed to tree process, like that sort of monitoring and evaluation?
Yeah, and part of the monitor evaluation, also just part of that community development framework, embedded in that community development framework, is the monitoring and evaluation. It's also embedded into our workflow. Because we're a learning organisation, we're always learning and developing new tools. And one of the tools that we recently started developing is the seed to tree approach, and you can get it. We've got some research papers there, you can have a look up on our website about it. But I actually started trialling an interactive seed to tree, which I tested on Genevieve and Eddie and sister girl here, Tanya. So we're a learning organisation, so I think part of this, when I say it's like a double loop learning process, it's also a learning process for us to improve the way that we do things, but also that it's culturally safe and culturally appropriate as well. So we have another team called Impact and Strategy, and we work closely with Impact and Strategy, and part of that is also part of our learning and development as an organisation, is that we have community of practice, which Genevieve runs. So we're always challenging ourselves that, you know, we can't remain stagnant. We've got to keep on learning to improve the way that we do things, but also as people. You know, you don't grow unless you learn yourself and improve the way that you do things. And same with communities, you know. Part of this process, they may fall down in one area, but they pick up and learn from that process, and then we'll try another approach. So part of the work we do is always continuous improvement, and it's about learning and development. Anything, Tanya? Whatever you...
In regards to indicators, when we do a project plan up with the community or individual person, we look at, because we do a lot of monitoring and evaluation throughout the project, and we do have indicators that we work with the community with. So they will, you know, we'll explain it to them properly, what does it mean, and at the end they can see whether they've moved forward or whether they've gone backwards, and that's fine too, because sometimes, you know, the project they'll have one idea, as they a little bit of loosen up and start, you know, moulding that project, it could go in a completely different direction. So that's where our indicators come into line. We can change them as they happen. We can change everything as it happens from start to finish. And it's just at the end there's a result for the community to look at and to see whether or not they've progressed, and whether they've progressed in the way that they wanted to. Not necessarily, you know, because we don't advise, we don't push in a direction that they don't need to go in, you know, so we'll let it happen, and it's a very fluid motion. So hopefully
Thank you. That answered your question. Any other questions? Got lots of time.
You guys obviously have a lot of work on and assume limited resources. Are there any instances where you have to prioritise work with communities, and if so, how do you do that?
Most times it's a discussion. We get most of the requests that we get, we do go forward with, but we don't want to do, like Dawn was saying, we don't want to do one-offs. So, you know, we're going to look at if we're going to have just one small project, depends what the content is, depends if we've got volunteers around that area. There's a few variables, but yeah, we sit down and talk about it first and talk to the community and, you know, see how far it goes. But
one would say the time frame the community wants it would be the priority that adds to it, yeah? Okay, just adding to that. Any further questions? It's a real early mark if that's the case.
Which is okay, because there's some really deadly presentations going on.
Hi Pemley, Tasha Naji from Kakadu region. Have you had any complications with helping countrymen in places where they have joint management, and what have those complications been?
You're saying if we had complications? Yeah, sometimes we deal with gatekeepers. There's a lot of gatekeepers out there, and yeah, I've never had to deal with too many gatekeepers, but because we get invited by the community, which is pretty good, because you develop that relationship. But Tanya, what have you done with gatekeepers?
They're there. We try not to get involved in the community politics. You know, we'll try and stay as neutral as we can, and sometimes we are a benefit to that other organisation. They just don't know it yet. You know, so there are a lot of things that we can assist with in relation to that, and with relationships as well. But yeah, we won't get involved with community issues. Individual stuff sometimes does come up, but yeah, it's not our role to be social workers, so we stay out of it.
And the other element of gatekeepers is sometimes government or councils, mainstream ones, and I think there's been a really strong community in WA who navigated around that and just kept going at their dream for their community, and the council eventually got on board because they had to. Everybody else was. So once again, it's that self-determination of our communities, which is the greatest strength that I think our people collectively carry.
That answer your question? Yeah, Connor.
That, I think, is the end of our session. Join me in thanking our lovely presenters here this afternoon. Hope you've taken a lot away. Thank you.